What's up, guys? In this video, I'm going to explain how to explain marketing performance to your clients. I'm going to start out with Google Analytics because it gives an overall website orientation view of marketing performance going into it. And then I'm going to go into Google Ads as well. Now, there are tons of videos already out there explaining Google Analytics and reports. There's tons of videos already out there explaining Google Ads and different reports and all these different features and things of that nature, right? What I'm doing is not getting into the nitty gritty. My video here is more so how to explain it to other non-marketing or non-digital marketing professionals. Typically clients that pay you money to run your ads or do some facet of your marketing. This video will come in handy. I'm going to keep it a very general like overview, and I'm going to tell you how to get as granular as it's needed, because you don't necessarily need to get super granular with clients unless they ask very, very specific questions where you do need to get more granular, or you have a client that is a little more granular and more into the data and wants to know more information. But typically, even the ones that are very sophisticated and know some of the right questions to ask, they're looking to you as the marketing expert. So they're going to look to you to figure this out. And most of their questions, along with most of the information that you need to give them, doesn't need to be super duper granular, but it does need to be relevant. So without further ado, we're going to get into it right now. So this is Google Analytics, Google Ads, and some other tips that we're going to go over. I'm going to start with Google Analytics, and I'm going to show you exactly what report I go into to start my meetings. I pretty much start my meetings the same way, every single way. You can see some of my previous videos where I talk about agendas, but I will most certainly have Google Analytics open with all the date ranges and presets set up so I can dive right in. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is a live client. This is Google Analytics, and this is specifically Google Analytics 4 and the home screen. The home screen gives you some snapshots and insights as far as users, conversions, events, users in the last minute, so on and so forth. However, we're not going to stay in the homepage for long because it's typically not a report I like to stay in for long. It doesn't really give me a lot of insights and takeaways. I mean, my date range here is the last 90 days, but I don't really have any breakout. So what I'm going to show you now is the number one reporting template that I go to inside Google Analytics, and it's under Reports. Click under Reports. This brings me to this screen here. Now I have a separate gray layer, I call it, or a left-hand layer outside, and we have a few different buckets. Now, you may look at different Google Analytics 4 profiles, and they may change. There might be custom buckets set up in here, but fear not, because we're going to go over everything you need to know right now. If you want to know our go-to default marketing report of which we start, and pretty much all agencies will start with this model as well, because it really showcases where the traffic is coming from and how it behaves once it gets to the website. We're going to first go into acquisition, and I'm going to go into not overview. You might be tempted to go there, but I'm actually going to go to the user acquisition overview. All right, so I'm in the user acquisition overview right now, and a couple different things going on. One of the reasons I like the user acquisition over traffic acquisition is because this bar graph right here shows me new users by first user. So I actually get to see not only the new users that are coming to the website, but it defaults to the first user, meaning it's a new user, but oftentimes it's the first time, at least in this conversion window or analytics look back window, that they're coming to the website. And we like to look at people when they first come to the website, because that gives us a sign of, okay, what brought them there first? How are they interacting with us the first time? And then we can see what other mechanisms we have to retarget customers after they leave the website, because unfortunately a lot of them do. So, all right, so what do we have here? We have our date range, we have our user acquisition. It tells me this default channel group stuff here. We got some lines going on, we got some bar graphs going on, and then we have a table, right? So the first thing that I'll do in this situation is I'm going to analyze my date range and change it. So if we go back here to my notes here, and you'll have this available from this video, the date range is the first thing I will actually go in and select. That's usually the first thing I like to do in any data platform or advertising digital platform, because what difference does everything make as long as your date range is alternate or changing, right? So what I'll typically do is I will do a month to date report, meaning, well, actually I won't. I'll do a month to date through yesterday. So today right now is March 7th, and I want to look at March 6th, at least the 1st through the 6th. So I'll do a month to date through yesterday, and I like that because it's got a full day of complete data. If I did month to date, that's fine, but March 7th isn't finished. It's 3:20 in the afternoon, and this business actually has some hours still left open in their day. So I'm going to do 1st through the 6th. I'm going to move my face over here, and then instead of just hitting apply right here, I'm actually going to go down, and then I'm going to compare. Now, there's a couple different default compare options. There's two comparisons that I like. One is month to date through yesterday versus previous month to date through yesterday. So that shows me, it'll show me February 1st through February 6th. So then I can see apples to apples the amount of days. I also like to look at previous year month to date through yesterday. So that would be, in this case, March 1st through March 6th of 2023. So for this example, I'm going to do same period last year, which actually is a nice default. I'm going to hit apply, and then my data is going to change. Awesome. So that's my first thing. One thing I like to do too right away, and it might be an extra step, we might be able to set up a custom report so I don't have to click this toggle all the time. But I don't like to look at first user primary channel group because I want to see the actual sources of traffic rather than these buckets that are supposedly grouping correctly the sources of traffic. So what I'll do is I'll go in here and I'm actually going to categorize by first user source medium. And this gives me a better representation of how to look at my traffic across the site. What I can see right now is I like starting from this bar graph, and it usually stays the same month over month or time period over time period as long as advertising budgets remain the same. So if I zoom here, we see what? New users by first user source medium. So our first user source medium is Google CPC, which is indicated by our Google Ads campaigns. Then we have Google Organic. So that's our organic presence on the search engine Google, impacted by our SEO efforts and some of our traditional advertising. Then we have Direct None, which is also influenced by traditional advertising, but also retargeting. And it acts as a catch-all for anything that's either not UTM tagged correctly or it's not just tracked correctly. Then we have some Facebook referral traffic, and then we have organic Bing. So those are our top 5 source mediums rather, new users by first user. And again, I like this first user because it's who came to the website first, right? So one thing I also like to go down to is, all right, what do I notice here? There's a big fluctuation, right? Fluctuation meaning there's a difference. So I have almost 1,900 new users from Google Ads this year versus last year, and that's a 43% increase. So that tells me right off the bat, I look for differences in these reports. So that tells me right off the bat, okay, A, we're either configuring our campaigns differently and sending a different type of traffic that has a lower cost per click in it, or we actually increased our budget. That's it. That's what that tells me right off the bat. I don't really put a lot of weight to anything that has increased or decreased anywhere from 10% or less, because that could be natural fluctuations in the market. But a 43% increase in this respect might yield something that is worth noting and taking a look at. One thing to note too, though, when you're early on in the month, that this date range doesn't really give us a lot of days. It's only the 1st through the 6th. So, for example, in the beginning of the month, maybe you pause campaigns because you were updating ad copy or offers, so therefore it would throw your numbers off a lot. Versus if you're looking at a longer stretch of data, like a month or 45 days or 90 days, well then you should see a more well-reliable data. So just note that when your date range isn't as big, you have less reliable information, and it's important to qualify that when giving this report. All right, so now that we have that, we can look at this graph here, and it doesn't show like there's too much craziness going on. Looks like direct traffic experienced a lot of traffic on the 4th for whatever reason. But other than that, everything looks pretty consistent within 50 to 100 users day over day. So I don't really need to get into that. And this is actually more reliable when you have a longer period of date range that you're comparing. I always like to have a comparison because what does it mean if you don't have a comparison? It's just numbers. You have to benchmark against yourself. That's like saying, okay, I did 15 squats today. All right, well, if you did 50 squats yesterday, is it really that good? Well, maybe it is because you shouldn't do any squats if you're doing that many squats yesterday. So if you did 50 squats last week, but only 15 this week, it really doesn't matter until you look at what you did previously. And that's why I always like to have comparisons, because it'll actually tell me stuff that's going on. So now, when I come in here, this is my source medium report by broken into a table. And I typically like to look at this first because it aggregates all the information I'm looking for. And the nice part about this is it's pretty simple. It looks pretty intimidating, but I'm going to break it down. The most left-hand column is actually your basis, right? That's your new users. That's how many people actually came to the site via all of these channels, right? Broken out for each date range. And the difference, or the percent difference, is noted as the percent change below. Now, the cool thing is any analytics report reads from left to right. So in importance, I should say. So although it's important to understand where new users come from, it's also important to understand where conversions and events are going to as well. We don't have total revenue set up for this business because it is a lead generation business, and it's not appropriate to track revenue inside Google Analytics 4 for this lead gen business. We use other ways of attributing revenue. So our main KPI, as far as hard metrics for the dealership, is actual conversions and events. I would say mostly conversions because those are all of the events that we deemed as important. And I'll get into that in a minute. But how we read this report is from left to right. And what I usually like to do is I usually look at the first couple columns on the left-hand side, and then I'll scroll all the way over to look at the first or the last so many columns on the right-hand side. And then I work backwards and kind of sandwich my way in the middle. So I don't really read from left to right. I start at this end, and then I look at this end, and then I look at all the stuff in between. Because all the stuff in between is going to tell me how these new users are translating into conversions. Because new users turn into engaged sessions, that shows an engagement rate. And then, that actually shows an average engagement time, how long they're actually interacting with the site for, how many events they did as far as we deem appropriate, like to track, and then how many conversions actually occurred. So let's get into it right now. So what do I see by looking at this? Okay, the first instance, I usually start at this data point. We have a 52% increase in new users. Okay, sounds good, right? It sounds like we're getting more new users to the site, so on and so forth. So where do we see that increase? Well, we see that increase in Google Ads, which we saw above. We also see it in organic. We also see it in direct traffic, and we also see it in Facebook. So I know that this store is actually running more Facebook campaigns, so that takes care of this one. Google Ads, we've actually changed the configuration of campaigns and have more campaigns bidding for lower cost per click terms than we did last year. And I just know that off the bat because I've been handling this account for a while. So that explains that. And then organic, though, and direct, that's gone up a little bit. So that's a little bit more interesting. Now, what really is interesting is when I look at direct traffic, we went from a 1 minute 40-second average engagement time to a 4 minute 12-second average engagement time. So that tells me, wow, there's some sticky traffic going on here. And usually we don't see an increase in average engagement time like that without a dip typically of first new users. But we actually see both an increase in new users, 86%, and an increase in average engagement time. Not only are we pumping more new users to the site, but they're sticking on the site longer. Interesting. That's something to know. I wonder why that's happening. And these are some of the questions you could start to formulate in your head, meaning, okay, that's an interesting takeaway. Why are we generating more new users via direct traffic and they're sticking 3 times as long? Was there not good tracking last year? Do we actually have viable results? And is the tracking right this year? That's one thing we've had to backtrack a lot within Google Analytics and GA4 is to make sure all the tracking lines up apples to apples. Because with GA4 and a lot of digital advertising solutions, tracking, as far as conversion tracking and even pixels without cookies and cookies being faded away in Google Chrome specifically, tracking in these third-party dashboards and platforms is becoming less and less reliable. So that's something to be said as well. So this kind of tells me, okay, this might be an interesting point, right? This might be an interesting point of contention. I look for the differences, right? The differences that don't really make sense or I wouldn't have guessed happened. And what can we capitalize on that? So out of all these numbers, I noticed that discrepancy the most. And that brings up a point that maybe I need to dive in a little bit more to that. When I look over to the right again, I'm going to look at events and conversions. Now, one thing right off the bat I notice is our conversions are down a lot, almost 92%. But there were 3,000 track conversions at this time last year. This store typically doesn't have 3,000 conversions. This tells me that, okay, a conversion that isn't really supposed to be a conversion, like a page view event, was being tracked as a conversion last year. So therefore, I don't really put a lot of weight to this 91% decrease. Trust me, if the store actually felt 91% decrease in leads, chats, and phone calls, I'd be receiving a call right now many times to say what's going on. So, but that hasn't happened in this example. So that's why it tells me that analytics is saying, okay, we probably didn't track conversions all that well last year, and we probably fixed that problem. So 269 sounds like a more reasonable number for this store in this time frame. If I look at events too, we have 45,000 events versus 31,000. So that tells me that we're increasing the amount of events. And interestingly enough, this is 43% increase, and our new users is almost around the same, 52%. So this tells me that a lot of our events, especially because there's so many, and our percentage increase went up by similar to our new user count. A lot of events in here are probably page views. And we don't necessarily want to track page views as conversions. Conversion is a chat, a lead, a phone call, or some way that they actually interacted with the store. It usually falls under one of those three. So that's what I get out of looking at all this information. I can scroll down. Do I see anything else that stands out to me? Not really. Bing looks about the same as far as average engagement time. And notice I jump around everywhere. I don't really have a flow. I just try and pick out things that I can find or see or that really are different. So Facebook looks about a little bit less for average engagement time, but there are more users to the site, so that does make sense. This guy right here, more new users via direct and more engagement time, that's very interesting. That might be the one main thing I want to look into. Now, this is what we normally see. Whenever there's an increase in new users, usually, unless we're adding significant more dollars and we're targeting better campaigns, typically by the law of averages, you're going to see your average engagement time dip a little bit. So this just under a minute versus a minute 15, that makes sense to me for the new users that were sent to the site. But that's why I keep going back to direct and saying, oh, okay, there's a lot more new users to this site, but their average engagement time stayed. I wonder if their conversions did too. Well, we can't really see conversions because, again, we weren't tracking conversions right last year. So we have to look at events. Well, we have more events. Interesting. I might have to look a little bit deeper to see about what's going on, and are we getting more actionable items from direct traffic than we did in the previous year? Whew, that was a doozy. But that is the 101 of what I look for in analytics. This is usually the page that I start with. and then I'll deep dive from there. But honestly, probably 85 to 90% of my conversation, insights, and initial reporting comes from this page right here. So again, to recap, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come to the acquisition and user acquisition report. You're going to want to change your default channel grouping to first user source medium, and you're going to want to customize your date range. Now, you may want to play with your date range and have a couple tabs open to see comparisons, and I'm going to do that right now real quick for you. Cool. So what I did right now is I actually made another duplication of my tab, and I typically do that so I can see multiple date range comparisons at once, and that way I can flip-flop back and forth and compare and see what's going on, see? So now we can see like stuff change. So right now I'm looking at March 1st through March 6th versus February 1st through February 6th. So now this is a month to date from through yesterday comparison. So now what is actually happening? So interesting, it shows we have more Google Ads traffic, about 52% more. Our organic traffic looks about the same. Our direct traffic has increased though. So we have some more direct traffic coming here too, and there's a lot more engagement time. Actually, this does make sense for this store because they were waiting on a shipment of a specific product to come in that's really, really, really hot in the market right now. And I would imagine that it came in because that's going to generate some more direct activity, and that's going to help engagement time, traffic, and conversions throughout the entire site. So I'm betting that they got that shipment in, but I'll find out when I see them next. But what I like to do is compare back and forth. So if I'm looking at this, does it really look that different from the previous year-to-year comparison? And it doesn't look as different. Like we don't have a, where is it? We don't have an 86% increase in new users. We only have a 56% increase in new users, but still it's an increase. And still our average engagement time is better. So this does tell me that I should probably look more into this. And look at this too. Our conversions were not fixed last year because we were still testing, but they were fixed a month ago because we fixed them many months ago. So now I see more of an apples to apples comparison. I see our conversions went up by about 24%, which is great. And direct actually has 67 conversions versus 30. So now conversions are going to be chats, phone calls, and lead form submissions for this specific client. Those are hard KPIs and hard ROI metrics and actions from our marketing. And that's why we like to start at. So that tells me this product they were waiting for that had a lot of demand and still does, they probably got in stock. So, but again, that's my theory. That's me knowing the store and knowing a little bit about the market and knowing about their store. So then when I go and talk to them, I can actually say, hey, did you get these XY product in stock finally? Because I see that your analytics traffic picked up in this category. And they might say yes or might say no. But I'm going to assume that that's what happened. So to recap, I would recommend you come in here, you go to the acquisition under user acquisition, you change your default grouping to first user source medium. You take a look at your bar graph. Well, before you do that, you're going to set your date range. You're typically going to do a time frame compare through yesterday compared to a similar time frame. Always use a comparison. Don't always just compare year over year or month over month. You got to look at both at times so you know what's happening. And then when you look at both and you do the right comparisons and you look at what's changed and not changed, you can actually make a good assumption and understand exactly what's happening because the numbers will tell a story. So acquisition, user acquisition, set up your date range, change your grouping, and look at the data and see what you find is different. And you will be able to tell by these percentages right off the bat. And typically these percentages are weighted by whatever the top source of traffic is. So that gives you a good way easily to identify data and make explanations on marketing. All right, guys, hope this helped. And stay tuned for the next video where I talk more about similar types of marketing performance reviews for clients, but specifically for Google Ads. Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. David Feldman-Makrias, signing out.